Did you know that around 17 milliliters of human blood can substitute an egg in baking? Well, you do now, and there's a lot more where that came from with today's Bumblebee vid, the top 10 unbelievable facts that will leave you astounded. We're starting off with everyone's favorite guy, Henry Pocket. Who's that? More of a what, actually, if you direct your attention to this. This here is a Henry Pocket, and nobody has any idea what they do at all. With 32 muscles in their ears and the ability to move each separately, cats can also hear sound waves in the range of 48 Hz up to 85 kHz. Knowing that the calls of rats and mice range from 22 to 70 kHz, it helps explain just what those amazing cat ears are tuned into. Bringing it back to the Henry's Pocket, it's generally assumed that the unique feature serves to amplify such sounds, detecting high put and delaying low pitch. Other theories around the usefulness of the Henry's Pocket include helping the ears fold, former genetic necessities we don't know about, excessive cuteness, and acting as a sound barrier so your cat somehow doesn't hear you yell at it to stop eating tape 30 times in a row. So why is it called a Henry's Pocket? No one seems to know that either, so I guess we're just adding that to the list. Seriously, don't know what it is, doesn't know how it got its name. Based on the assumptions, we can go out on a limb and share our best theory, which is actually Joseph Henry, an American scientist who was well regarded during his time. He served as the first secretary to the Smithsonian Institute and is best known for his studies in electromagnetic induction, magnetism, and radio waves. The Henry is the name of a standard electrical unit of inductive resistance, so it might correlate. Let's learn about baby's first beard. Parenthood. It's so perfect and amazing with all the stepping on Lego and sticky handprints and consumption of their own bodily hair. I ain't lying. Lanugo is the name for the soft, downy, unpigmented hair that covers a baby's body beginning in the 5th month of pregnancy. In early gestation, baby doesn't have enough fat to regulate her own or his own body temperature. As a result, Lanugo will begin to grow as a light coating over most of the body to help keep them warm. Some newborns have Lanugo covering their bodies at birth, especially if they're born prematurely. I myself was actually one of those peach fuzz babies. The fuzz first starts its growth as a mustache that will then progress over the entirety of the body in the womb. The baby then eats this fine hair as it falls off in sheets inside the womb, and when the baby has its first bowel movement outside the womb, well, anyone who's a mom knows the color and smell of that first diaper. These trees quite literally prove that a problem and its solution are an arm's length away. These are the intriguing Chechen and Chaca trees found in Central America. Look how pretty that bark is. Then there are those trees that grow really good climbing limbs. It's too bad because Chechen's tree bark has poison that's so strong just touching it or its sap will give you a blistering rash. Meanwhile, the cure to this exact specific poison lies in its sister tree, the Chaca. And what's really strange is that these two trees are always found right next to each other in nature, like within feet if not inches. There is a Mayan myth that comes with these trees that they are from two brothers that fought over each other over the love of a woman, but they end up killing each other and the woman dies of heartbreak. One of the brothers, Kinchi, was kind and caring and thus became the Chaca tree. The other brother, Tzik, was cold-hearted and arrogant and became the Chechen tree. The fact that these trees are right next to each other in nature and yet provide exactly opposite effects truly does speak to sibling rivalry and its love. Can be completely different, but always there or around for one another. Next up is our monarch that matters, and it's the butterfly. Screw the rest of the systems, they're all figurehead basis anyways. So, as you may know, monarch butterflies migrate to Mexico and back every year. Now during that year, there are a full 4 generations of butterflies that will live, reproduce, and die during the journey. Upon returning back from Mexico, the butterfly manages to find the same tree its relative 4 generations before it started out at a year ago, despite having never been there. Bam, butterfly knowledge. Nothing is more charitable than offering the homeless a rentable coffin. Dirty, smoggy, industrial, Victorian England, where consumption is everywhere, the absence is good, and homeless run the city. Quite literally, industrialization was the reason for an exploding homeless population. Part of the problem was that in order to accommodate a railroad, neighborhoods had to be demolished, but then the workers from out of town flock into London looking for work to build said railroad. The jobs they took gave them money, but in order to work to exist, houses couldn't anymore. So these workers are coming in and actually creating an even greater demand for housing. So how do you fix the situation? Yeah, I got it. Let's rent out actual literal effing coffins. Look at this, see for your own eyes. What was offered in the way of amenities at these homeless shelters were penny sit-ups, 2 penny hangovers, or 2 to 4 penny coffins. Of these, the penny sit-up was the cheapest amenity and it got a person food and shelter on a bench all night in a warm building. However, the sitter wasn't allowed to sleep, and in order to make sure they didn't, monitors would walk the hall to wake them up. If you want to sleep, you gotta rent a coffin for 2 or 4 cents depending on the size and shape you need. Salvation Army was among the first to provide provide and manage these shelters. I wanted to use as a reminder to say not to donate to this charity. There's so many better Christian ones out there, and small local charities in general that'll actually benefit your immediate community. Mom, when you see this, I'm super sorry, but next up is beaver tail with a side of beaver butt. Beaver tails, it's a delightful Canadian treat originating from fry bread style of Bannock indigenous colonies make. To make beaver tail, you mix up your dough, roll it out thin, toss her in the hot oil till she's golden on both sides. You're gonna scoop it out, hit it with that 1-2, powdered sugar, and then serve. And some people love to serve it with ice cream. Vanilla is obviously a popular option. Raspberry is a little more niche, but you know what a real non-fry bread beaver tail and these two ice creams have in common? They all can be found on a beaver's ass. Raspberry and vanilla flavored ice cream is often enhanced with castrium. Do you know what that is? No, nobody effing does. It's drawn from beaver anal glands. So if you love vanilla or raspberry ice cream the way my mom does, you may want to start reading the packaging to see if farts is an ingredient. Now for the time the World War needs brought the World War weeds. During World War II, the United States government not only temporarily legalized ganja production, but released an educational documentary on how to properly grow hemp plants at home. See, you may already be shocked you haven't heard of this, but don't be hard on yourself. Once World War II was over, the Department of Agriculture worked tirelessly to try and destroy all evidence they did this. The Japanese occupation of the Pacific theaters had cut basically all of America's hemp supply. The shortage was so bad that the government granted farmers who grew it and their families immunity from the draft. Why was hemp so important? Its fibers were used to make the parachute straps and weather-resistant canvases, as well as different types of nautical ropes and cords, and the material needed to rig both sails and tether anchors to ships. And believe it or not, there was a time when hemp was actually viewed as a cure-all medicine in Canada and the United States. Its emergence in Western medicine began in the mid-19th century when apothecaries and pharmaceutical companies started including extracts of the plant. They'd watched the indigenous colonies of Canada and America use it for medicine, and they pursued it themselves. By the early 1900s, extracts were so popular that doctors were prescribing it for just about anything. Hemp extract was not only viewed as an effective sedative, but also a remedy for anyone suffering from migraines, nausea, addiction, menstrual pain, gout, whooping cough, epilepsy, cancer, just to name a few. It was even used to treat STIs like gonorrhea and herpes. Unfortunately, both hemp and cannabis would be declared illegal in Canada and the United States 2 decades later, criminalizing useful crops and pressing the pause button on medical research and innovation. Is it tricks in your mind, or is it just distortion of the eye? There's a well-known generic jump scare cliche you get in horror films where the main character is staring into a mirror and then they do the look away and they look back and there's some sort of horrific apparition. This real-life, not insidious jump scare version is called the strange face in the mirror illusion. That's the name. Usually, as you know, they do crap like hyperhuluchondriactical whatever for a condition's title, but I guess why give it a long dramatic name when you can call it exactly what it is? The visual illusion is easy. All you have to do is stare at yourself for around 10 minutes in a mirror without moving your gaze from the mirror and ensuring you pick a point to focus on and stay on it. You can see the effects taking place even after about a minute or so of doing this. Your face will distort and morph, and after a while, a lot of people start to see unpleasant, disturbing, and often frightening images depicting things like animals, demons, bodily, or graphic horrors. One experiment participant for something like this said the creepiest moment, however, was when my eye, and I swear this happened, looked away and then looked back at me. A few articles have stated this occurs because of the Troxler effect, which is basically where the brain selects important information and influences our perception. To supposedly lessen the processing burden on itself, the brain removes its attention from the less important information, from the feeling of our tongue resting on our mouth to the way that our clothes feel on our skin. Regardless of its explanation, it's something anyone can do, although I wouldn't recommend it. Can be a very disturbing experience. Probably one of the coolest warfare tactics of World War II was the Navajo code talkers. During World War I, the Choctaw language was used instrumental in multiple successful surprise attacks against the Germans, but after the war, Germany and Japan were impressed by Canada's indigenous people's resilience and sent students to study native cultures. Naturally, US and Canada military are now uneasy about continuing to use code talkers during World War II. They were afraid the code could now easily be cracked, but that was before they learned about the complexity of the Navajo language. Code talkers didn't speak plain language in Navajo either, but rather encoded the messages in a phonetic code and then incorporated other vocabulary adaptations. Anyone trying to intercept the message would have to know both the Navajo language and the code book, but also their phonetics. This is how operations such as Iohima were successful. Given their historic significance, the code talkers are massively underrepresented underrepresented in National Archives and Canadian American War education. The Code Talker program wasn't even publicly revealed until 1968. Due to blatant racism, this division was not extensively photographed, documented, or filmed in action, something done for even the most top secret of secret operations. Photographs of the Navajo Indian Code Talkers in U.S. Marine Corps 1943 to 48 is a file that contains the only 25 photos of Code Talkers. Those are the photos you've been seeing on screen throughout this segment. This lost history is the result of horrific racism Indigenous people faced from their own government and citizens while serving them. At least in 1981, when the NBC show Real People aired a segment on Code Talkers, it inspired 17,000 Americans to write to the president seeking some form of recognition for them. President Ronald Reagan issued a certificate of recognition to the Code Talkers and proclaimed August 14, 1982 as Navajo Code Talkers Day, so put in your calendars, folk. Long after the war, Code Talker Peter McDonald Sr. recorded a sample of Navajo Code Talk for the Department of Veteran Affairs. This is what Navajo plain talking code sounded like. Zombie salmon. That's it. No fun preamble, no rhymes, no cool title. This crap is creepy as hell, and this is your gore and not safe for work warning. Their skin is pallid gray, covered in mold, and beginning to fall off. Their heads are sometimes bumpy and squishy. They may be missing an eye. Or two, but I'm not talking about a dead fish yet. This one's still breathing and swimming even as its own skin is floating off down the river. Zombie salmon are fish that have returned to their freshwater spawning grounds but are still in the twilight zone between life and death. After juvenile salmon leave their natal lakes and streams for life at sea, their magnetic sense of direction eventually does lead them back. These now adults swim upstream to reproduce, a process called spawning. Once they have released and fertilized their eggs, it only takes a few weeks for those salmon to die. This environment can no longer sustain their bodies. During those weeks, their bodies begin to shut down and actually rot. Heart, arteries, muscles all start to fall out. Digestive organs will shrivel up, the skin loses its bright and colorful hues, and their organs will literally be trailing behind them from their open cavernous body. The best thing about zombie salmon is that they very quickly become dead salmon, and dead salmon does everything for the environment. Those corpses feed birds, which especially like to feast on the eyeballs. Flies and other insects will lay their eggs in the rotting carcasses, and the same flies that will feed the baby salmon that will hatch from eggs in nearby gravel beds. As they continue to decay, dead salmon wash up on shorelines and riverbanks, fertilize trees and other plants. So, what happens if you eat zombie salmon? Well, you're not gonna die or become a zombie. If anything, it's just gonna taste like it's their fat that makes salmon so delicious, and all of that burned off as energy during the fish's long journey home to excitedly lay eggs in the family watering hole and then go die somewhere. Not that you should want to eat this anyways. I'm not even sure we're allowed to show pictures of something this horrible, but I guess you guys will find out for me. Alrighty, thank you so much for your time today, and I hope you enjoyed. Be sure to like and subscribe if you want to see more from us, and until next time, comment down below any unbelievable facts you may know.